So in a short time, I'm going to show the way up to the top of this hill. And this mound is the one that you saw in the film. This is the famous Armageddon, which is a pile of rubble, layer upon layer upon layer upon layer. Okay, so you realize that thousands of years ago, the first city was further down, and then it was destroyed, rebuilt, another layer was added onto it, and then so on and so forth. 25 layers total, okay? So it's just like a cake. And later on, when we get up to the top, I'm gonna show you to a pit that was dug out there, and you'll see the different layers. Just like a volcanic eruption, one layer upon the other, this is essentially what Tell is all about. Now, the first thing that you need to remember is that there was always a reason to build a city, just like today, okay? There has to be a reason, whether economic reason or something else. In the case of this city, it was the fact that it was adjacent to the main highway. You remember what was the name of that central artery across the land? The Great Coastal Highway, the Via Maris, okay? And so it's the same road we were on earlier, okay? We traversed that valley up, by way of Caesarea, and now we're further inland and past the hills behind us. This site here was the key site that guarded the gateway back into the coastal area. So whoever controlled this city was effectively in control over this section of the road. Does this make sense? And that explains why it was captured time and time again, changing hands between various different rulers, various different kings. In fact, the very first war campaign recorded in history is to do with the campaign over Megiddo. 15th century BC, imagine, almost 3,500 years ago. That was Pharaoh, one of the pharaohs, Thutmose III, in the mid 15th century BC, and he describes in hieroglyphs, how he basically made his war campaign against those rebellious Canaanite cities, and eventually how he managed to capture Megiddo and many, many other cities. So this is the very first recorded document in history as to a war campaign. This will also be an awesome example of an Old Testament city, okay? And typically we make a distinction between Old Testament cities and New Testament cities. Old Testament cities, right, at the time of the Old Testament, the Bible, they were typically situated on top of a hill. Why? Protection, defense, okay? New Testament era, that's the Roman period, they were far more secure. So many of them were actually on flat area, flat ground. They didn't really need, for the most part, there were some on top of mountains or hilltops, but for the most part, there was far better security. But Old Testament cities, for the most part, were actually situated on top of the hill. So without further ado, let's head uphill.